We live in an era where technology often surpasses our wildest imagination. But did you know that our ancestors invented many things that seem ahead of their time? From an ancient freezer to the mysterious flying machine. These inventions reveal how brilliant ancient minds really were. Number 7. Iolipoli, the ancient steam engine. The first practical steam engine was invented by Thomas Newcomen in 1712, and then later improved by James Watt between 1763 and 1776, helping launch the Industrial Revolution. But the idea that steam could create movement did not begin in the 70s. That part goes all the way back to the 1st century CE. A Greek mathematician and engineer named Heron of Alexandria, also called Hero Alexandrinus, described a strange machine known as the Aeolipoli, named after Aiolos, the Greek god of the winds. And honestly, for something that old, it sounds almost absurdly advanced. The machine worked using a boiler placed beneath a hollow metal sphere. Once the water was heated, steam traveled upward through a pair of pipes, which also acted as the sphere's pivots. Attached to the sphere were two bent nozzles facing opposite directions. As the steam escaped through them, it created a combined reactive thrust, generating torque and forcing the sphere to spin around its axis. That spinning would keep accelerating until traction and air resistance balanced it out. And this wasn't just some dreamy idea. A working reconstruction of Heron's device managed to spin at around 1,500 revolutions per minute, using only about 1.8 pounds per square inch of pressure. But it had one big problem. It was almost useless as real power. Historian Paul Kaiser pointed out that the rotating sleeve joint would lose too much energy through friction or steam leakage, and the sphere itself was too small to act as a proper flywheel. So while it looked brilliant, it couldn't do much practical work. Which makes the real question even more strange. Why did Heron build it? He never clearly said. Some think it was simply a novelty, designed to impress people. Some say it may have been used in temples, where hidden steam pipes could make statues appear to breathe through the nose or mouth, creating the illusion of divine power. So far, no one knows why he actually created it. Number 6. Aerial screw, the ancient flying machine. Leonardo da Vinci was, by any metric, a real genius. But still, he was trapped inside the limits of the 15th century. Long before helicopters, planes, or even engines existed, he was already sketching machines that looked like they belonged to another age. One of the strangest was his aerial screw, designed between 1480s and 1490s, a flying machine that many now see as an early ancestor of the helicopter. The design looked bizarre. A giant spiral-shaped rotor, almost like a massive linen screw, meant to spin fast enough to force air downward and lift the machine upward. In simple words, Leonardo was trying to make a machine climb into the sky by rotating itself into the air. And somehow, that basic idea was not just an idea. It was actually rooted in a surprisingly sharp understanding of lift, rotation, and control. Of course, Leonardo had one big problem: his time period. His original idea required human beings to run around a central pole to power the machine. And no matter how brilliant the design was, that part was never going to work in real life. Human muscle could not generate enough sustained force to get the thing airborne. But here's where it gets weird again. In 2024, researchers at Johns Hopkins University, led by Suryansh Prakar, modeled Leonardo's aerial screw in 3D CAD and studied its aerodynamics and noise output. Their conclusion was surprising. The screw-shaped design could generate lift, and in some ways, it even performed better than modern propellers. It required less mechanical power for the same load, and it also produced lower, less irritating noise. It was ahead of its era. Number 5. Piri-Reis map. Now, this might not be as cool as Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine, but it may be even harder to explain. On October 9th, 1929, a German theologian named Gustav Adolf Deissmann was cataloging neglected material inside the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul when he came across a strange piece of gazelle skin parchment. That forgotten document turned out to be one of the most debated maps ever found, the Piri-Reis map. It had been drawn in 1513 by Hagji Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, aka Piri-Reis, an Ottoman admiral, sailor, and cartographer. According to Piri-Reis himself, he built the map using around 20 older charts and source maps, including 8 Ptolemaic maps, 4 Portuguese maps, 1 Arabic map, and even a map linked to Christopher Columbus. And what puzzled historians wasn't just the age of the map, it was the detail. That's because the coastline of South America appears shockingly accurate for the early 16th century. But the real controversy sits farther south. Donde está Biotam? One distorted landmass on the map has led some researchers to argue that it may show Antarctica nearly 300 years before its official discovery. That theory exploded in 1965, when Professor Charles Hapgood published Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. He argued that parts of the map may have come from source material far older than history officially allows, possibly from a lost civilization with advanced navigational knowledge. Critics pushed back hard, saying that the supposed Antarctica is just a warped extension of South America. And honestly, that's the maddening part. Nobody agrees. But whether it shows Antarctica or not, the Piri-Reis map still raises one mind-boggling question. How did people in 1513 know this much about a world they supposedly hadn't explored yet? It's still a mystery. Number 4. Ancient Indian plastic surgery. Well, plastic surgery is not a new invention. You won't believe it, but it goes back more than 2,500 years. Around 600 BCE, an ancient Indian physician named Sushruta was already doing procedures that sound shockingly modern even today. He is often called the father of surgery, and for great reason. Sushruta wrote a massive medical text known as the Sushruta Samhita, one of the earliest known works focused entirely on surgery and medicine. Inside it, he described over 300 surgical procedures and listed more than 120 surgical instruments, many of which were carefully designed for precision. But what really makes it fascinating is one specific procedure: rhinoplasty, or nose reconstruction. Back then, in parts of ancient India, cutting off a person's nose was used as a form of punishment. That created a real need for reconstruction, and Sushruta developed a method to do exactly that. His technique involved taking skin from the forehead, or sometimes the cheek, and using it to rebuild the nose. This method, known today as an autograft, is still used in modern reconstructive surgery. And he didn't stop there. Sushruta also described cataract surgery, methods for treating fractures and dislocations, and even early ideas around sterilization, using medicinal herbs to clean wounds and reduce infection. What makes this even more remarkable is how far his influence traveled. His work eventually reached the Greek and Islamic worlds, shaping medical thinking for centuries. Number 3. Minoan plumbing system. As we've said earlier, our ancestors created inventions that seem too advanced for their time, and this thing is one of them. We mean, how do people living more than 4,000 years ago end up with plumbing that, in some ways, looked cleaner and smarter than what parts of Europe had much later? The story begins on the island of Crete during the Minoan era, which lasted from 3200 BC to 1100 BC. But the real leap in water engineering started during the early Minoan period, around 3500 to 2150 BC, and reached its most impressive form during the Neopalatial period, around 1700 to 1400 BC, especially at the Palace of Knossos, often tied to King Minos. And this wasn't just a few clever drains. The Minoans built an actual water management system beneath their buildings and cities. At Knossos, which covered around 75,000 to 125,000 square meters and may have held tens of thousands of people, they used carefully shaped terracotta pipes to move fresh water, stormwater, and wastewater through a surprisingly organized underground network. These pipes were built in sections measuring around 600 to 750 millimeters, fitted together with flanged joints, and sealed so tightly that modern engineers have said some of them were made to a quality comparable to modern standards. Well, that alone is insane. But it gets better. Some Minoan buildings had what appear to be flush toilets, drainage systems, and even arrangements for hot and cold water. They also used both open gravity-fed aqueducts and closed pressurized pipe systems, which basically means they likely understood hydraulic ideas like water pressure, siphons, and the principle that water seeks its own level. Number 2, Yakchal, the ancient freezer. Not all ancient inventions were built to kill or destroy. Some were built to solve a very simple problem. How do you keep food cold in the middle of a brutal desert with no electricity and temperatures that could roast you alive? Somehow, the ancient Persians figured that out more than 2,000 years ago. They built something called the Yakchal, a Persian word that roughly means ice pit. These structures began appearing around the 4th century BC, during the era of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and they were basically the ancient world's answer to a freezer. From the outside, a Yakchal looked like a giant dome-shaped mud tower, often rising around 15 meters high. But the real brilliance was in how it was built. Its walls could be around 2 meters thick, made from a mixture of sand, clay, straw, ice, and animal hair, materials that gave it incredible insulating power. Some designs also included a small ventilation opening at the top, while others used wind catchers, tower-like vents that pulled cooler air inside and pushed warm air upward and out. And then there was the water. The Persians used an underground water system called a qanat to channel water from subterranean sources into the Yakchal, or they brought it in manually. During colder months, that water could freeze and be stored as ice blocks, which were then preserved for use in the summer. Inside, temperatures could drop to around -5 degrees Celsius, cold enough to preserve food year-round and even store ice for desserts like faludi, made with rosewater, lemon juice, crushed ice, and starch noodles. And honestly, that's the part that feels impossible. So number 1, the south-pointing chariot. Ancient Chinese didn't just invent magnetic compasses to understand direction. Long before modern navigation systems existed, they also created something far stranger. A mechanical chariot that could keep a figure pointing in the same direction no matter how many turns the vehicle made. And of course, that sounds impossible until you realize how clever it really was. The south-pointing chariot is usually linked to 3rd century CE China, especially the engineer Ma Jun, who lived during the Cao Wei state in the Three Kingdoms period. But like many ancient inventions, its origin is buried under layers of legend. Some stories push it all the way back to the mythical Yellow Emperor, Huangdi, Marsh, who supposedly used it during the Battle of Zhuolu against Qi Yu after a supernatural fog caused his army to lose direction. Other traditions connect it to the early Zhou dynasty, where it was said to guide foreign envoys home. Whatever its true origin, the machine itself is what makes it unforgettable. The chariot carried a small pointing figure on top, usually set to face south before the journey began. As the wheels turned, an internal gear system adjusted the figure so it kept facing the same direction, even while the chariot itself twisted and turned. Historians believe this was done using a differential gear mechanism, the same basic principle later used in modern cars. It's amazing. Well, that's it from us. Hope you found this video interesting. And be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.